ย We continue with the Buddha's words on loving kindness on page 37. Page 37.
Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Now let us chant the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom
companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs.
I will abide,
Pervading one quarter with the mind imbued with loving kindness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with compassion, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with gladness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will.
Yeah, next we have an opportunity to take the refuge in Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha and the 5 precepts for the new year 2025. And yeah, so opportunity to start the new year, sort of determining what's most important in your life. This this quality of confidence or faith in the Buddha as your teacher, and remembering this confidence that he realized liberation, awakening, and the confidence in the Dhamma, his teaching, the way of practice, that the Noble Eightfold Path leads in this direction where the Buddha himself developed. and taking this as the highest guiding principle in our lives for sort of aligning our actions to the Dhamma. So basically developing your life more and more, practicing to develop it in line with the Dhamma, with the teaching of the Buddha. And then the confidence or faith in the Sangha, in the sense the noble Sangha, not just the Bhikkhu Sangha, that there were some people, and there are some people who have practiced this teaching of the Buddha, and who have realized it, and then that is some possibility that these people realized it in the past or now, that now we have the same opportunity to also apply the teaching of the Buddha and become one of these noble disciples ourselves, and to aspire for that. Then so it's something worthwhile to do, to have this aspiration. Basically it gives some guidance or some direction to how you want to live, and basically what kind of person you want to become. And if one doesn't have this sense of aspiration, then you will just get sort of pulled by circumstances and whatever happens. While if you have this aspiration, you have a sort of guiding principle, and seeing this as important, and then gradually developing your life in accordance with the Dhamma, and basically developing in this line. And also this aspiration to keep the 5 precepts for the new year or for the rest of your life. Then you keep in mind these precepts, or keep in mind the Dhamma, and it is also sati, quality of mindfulness. And based on that, you can also reflect about the actions, sense of purifying your actions, or training yourself to keep these 5 precepts. And also your heart, your citta becomes different. You develop different tendencies if you keep these precepts, or if you take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. And as a result of keeping these precepts, then you also don't engage in anything that would be harmful for yourself or for others. And also other beings can feel safe in your presence, and so they can notice that you are a harmless being who is gentle and trustworthy. And also you have a positive influence on society in general. The more people keep these 5 precepts, the more peaceful will be our society at large as well. While the less people keep these 5 precepts, or the more seriously they violate them, then the more sort of chaotic and violent society will become naturally. And so it also is a contribution for that as well. And the most important function of virtue of these 5 precepts is that they lead to cessation. In Pali called nirodha. Cessation is a synonym for nibbana. And in this sense, the cessation of desire, aversion, and delusion, or the cessation of defilements. And so, if you practice to develop these precepts, then naturally you abandon coarser forms of desire, aversion, and delusion, and because of that your mind will incline towards cessation, nibbana, at least to some level, or develop in this direction of liberation. So there's this perspective that more or less using virtue, using precepts as a tool for liberation, as a sort of training program to develop yourself and your actions. And so, you can do that and aspire for that for the new year. So, the requesting is on page 126, and then the precepts themselves and the chanting afterwards is on page 128. But first, page 126. And anyone who likes to volunteer to lead the chanting is welcome. Mm-hmm. Only 5. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Sure, you're welcome. Yes, sure, yes.
Repeat after me. Mahyam bante tisaranena saha. Pancha silani yachama. Dutiyampi mahyam bante tisaranena saha. Pancha silani yachama. Tatiyampi mahyam bante tisaranena saha. Pancha silani yachama.
John, if you like. Okay, good. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Tutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tisarana gamanang nittitang. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kami somichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya macha pamadatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbutting yanti, tasma silang visodai. Okay, we can continue with some meditation. can find some body posture that's reasonably comfortable to sit in for half an hour on a chair or cross-legged. Body posture where you can sort of settle down and sit peacefully and stable. Sitting in a way which is upright and relaxed, wakeful and attentive. And you can start, can maybe feel the body posture, sitting, noticing how the body feels at the moment. Also noticing how is the mood or the mind state at the moment. Yeah, then we can maybe the evening of the New Year practice some mudita meditation, sympathetic joy. The quality of rejoicing in the good actions or good qualities of others, or the good fortune of other people. Either one's own good actions or good qualities, or the good qualities of other people. Yeah, and it's just an example. Give an example. Let's say if you give a gift to a friend, and then the friend is happy, then you are sort of happy along with him, and that would be probably a example of a mudita that most people know, even if they don't practice meditation. So this quality of sympathetic joy with someone else, for someone else's good fortune or good qualities. Yeah, and so you can remember maybe some good actions that you did during this year, either here at the monastery in various ways, or just in general, helping other people, practicing generosity, or keeping precepts, maybe learning the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, practicing meditation. Yeah, and then also developing example, this quality of sympathetic joy for the other people here and yourself, with this interest in practicing the teaching of the Buddha, of doing good actions. Whatever good actions they do, may it bring them great benefit. Usually the classic traditional Buddhist expression for that is sadhu. But yeah, this also is important to also develop this quality of mudita itself, the actual mind state. When one sees someone doing something good, then one is happy about it. And so yeah, just like with loving kindness, one can also develop this mind state of sympathetic joy, remembering one's own actions, or some good actions of other people, some good qualities. And whatever good actions they do, may they bring them great benefit. And this quality of mudita is a bright and uplifting character. And if you like, you can continue developing sympathetic joy. Otherwise, you can also just stay with your breath. If you feel the body, where can you feel the breath most clearly? Staying continuously with each in and out breath, being aware during the pause, the whole in-breath, the whole out-breath. Noticing the quality of the breath, the flowing smooth quality, which is pleasant. And you can also do that with a sense of sympathetic joy, because staying with the breath, mindfulness of breathing, is the path to awakening. So you can have mudita, that you develop the path to awakening by staying with the breath, developing mindfulness and right effort, samadhi. then if you can stay for some time with the breath, maybe you can expand your awareness, experiencing the whole body, breathing in and out, noticing where else can you feel the breath in the body. For example, in the chest or around the nose, it's quite easy to notice. But then you can also feel some movement maybe in the legs or the arms. So breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Breathing out, experiencing the whole body. It's like pervading the whole body with the breath. With this smooth and flowing quality of the breath. And if you do that continuously, then the mind becomes less diverse and more unified. You just stay with this one thing, with this one experience of the whole body being pervaded by the breath. And the mindfulness is established there, just with this one thing. And leaves behind everything else, the entire world, or the connection with the world, with anything else. So in this way one could say the mindfulness of the body is a support to cross over the flood, a support to develop a stable, unified mind. why were we born as human beings? Why are we born into this world with these conditions? And why do we have a certain character, certain abilities that are different from other people? And who or what creates our future, our destiny, for better or worse? And so for most people these questions remain a mystery, but there's nothing mysterious about them for the Buddha, because he completely understood the causality of conditioned phenomena, of sankharas. And the Buddha saw that neither fate nor a divine being is responsible for that, but our kamma, our intentional actions by body, speech and mind. And so the Buddha says in various discourses, we also chanted it just now in the evening, beings are the owners of their kamma, or the owners of their actions. They are heir of their actions. They originate from the actions. They are bound by their actions. Beings have their actions as their refuge. It is action or kamma that distinguishes beings as inferior and superior. So the Buddha introduces an interesting idea in this statement, that he says beings have their kamma, their actions, as their refuge. And so last New Year I talked about the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha as a refuge. And so this year, how can our kamma, the power of our actions, be our refuge? And so I think generally the topic of kamma, I think if one asks a normal, let's say average person about it, who doesn't know much about Buddhism, people have this idea that kamma functions like some bad fate, so some sort of unchangeable force that comes from the past, and sort of that you can't fight. So say some bad fortune strikes, and then someone says, sort of, it's probably a bad kamma. But but if you know the teaching of the Buddha, then you know that is very different how the Buddha teaches about kamma. And the Pali word kamma itself means action, in the sense of doing something, and more specifically intentional action by body, speech and mind. In a wider sense, it also means our actions and the results we experience because of our actions in this life and also future lives. And the Buddha often gives this definition that kamma is intention, volition or will. And so mental action is the most powerful and important one, because then all verbal and bodily actions come from our intention ultimately. So what is the most basic principle of kamma? If we describe our experience in a very simple way, then it's basically like this. It's you experience something with the six senses. So you see something, hear something, and so on, and some mental phenomena appears in the mind, some image, some thought, and then so you have this experience with the six senses, and then you act as a response by body, speech and mind, or you relate to it in a certain way to this experience. And that is what creates further becoming, what shapes your future existence. And so that determines in what track your life develops in this life, or what kind of person you become in the future. And and also what kind of being you become in future lives, what kind of realm existence you will reappear after you pass away. And so, just an example, for example, there's some image or some thoughts come up, and then, for example, either you can sort of dwell on them and make them stronger, or maybe you can think about something else or emphasize them less. And so you can, for example, strengthen or weaken these tendencies to think in this way, or for these images to come up. Or let's say, whatever, someone says something unpleasant and then you react in a certain way, say with loving-kindness or aversion, or you think about it in a certain way. And then, so you have this experience, and then sort of you respond in some way, and that is what shapes your future. And so, usually your life seems rather sort of complicated and diverse, and there are all these different things, but actually, that the Buddha, you could say, sometimes reduces this to this very simple structure. You experience the sense contact and feelings through the six senses, and then you respond to the sense contact, and that determines what you will experience in the future and what kind of being you become. And so it's more or less, you can see it's basically like a feedback loop. Depending on your actions, what you do, how you direct your mind, how you think about it, then that determines in which direction this feedback loop goes, for the better or worse. And so the teaching of the Buddha about Kamma is different, I think, than most people would expect. Its teaching of the Kamma is empowering, so in the sense that by the power of your own actions, you can shape yourself and your destiny. And either it happens habitually, out of craving and ignorance, or you can do it deliberately and purposefully by following this teaching of the Buddha, this training in virtue, the training of the higher mind, meditation, and the training in higher wisdom. And so the Buddha gives this simile, this example. He says, irrigators channel the water, arrow makers straighten the arrow shafts, carpenters shape the wood, the wise train themselves. So the Buddha gives in various discourses this sort of similes of basically comparing the Dhamma practice with a craft. And so this aspect of training, and the Buddha also calls his teaching the unsurpassable training. So he says there are various kind of trainings or crafts that you can learn, like say carpentry or engineering or maybe some martial arts or whatever kind of, or chess, playing chess, or some kind of sports, whatever, becoming a footballer or something. And so there are all these kind of trainings, but it's just a sort of worldly training that doesn't lead to anything higher or anything special, while this unsurpassable training in virtue, samadhi, like a training of the mind, and in wisdom, that leads to liberation, to the realization of nibbana, to the cessation of suffering. And so this is why it's called the unsurpassable training. And the main belief that you have to accept if you want to practice the teaching of the Buddha is that human beings have this capacity to cultivate beneficial and ennobling qualities. And on the other hand, also that human beings are capable of abandoning harmful qualities and mind states. And also that human beings are capable to realize liberation by their own skillful effort. And then if you improve the skillfulness of your actions, especially your mental actions, what you do with your mind, that you can experience a more profound happiness or peace up to the complete or ultimate peace. This means that our destiny doesn't depend on good luck or fate or some divine being, and it's nothing mysterious, but it's the result of what we do and say, and also what we do with our mind, and so our intentional bodily and verbal actions, and also our mental actions, what we think and what we do with our mind. And so from that, you can maybe already get an idea why the Buddha says that beings have their Kamma as their refuge, because then ultimately the power of your actions can lead you to liberation, and it can lead you to more and more sublime peace and happiness up to the ultimate. And so if you trust in this capability to develop yourself, then you can use this training and develop it to a higher and higher level. And so how do actions determine results? In a brief explanation, the Buddha gives this distinction of wholesome and unwholesome, or skillful and unskillful, kusala and akusala in Pali. And the wholesome actions would be actions that don't harm ourselves and others, or both, and they are sort of not motivated by desire, aversion and delusion. So for example, or by the positive opposite, so for example by generosity or renunciation, or by loving kindness or compassion, or by clarity and wisdom. And these actions that are based on freedom from desire, aversion and delusion, they ripen in pleasant results, the Buddha says, in long term. While the unwholesome actions, they harm either yourself or others or both, and they are motivated by desire, aversion or delusion, and then they ripen in unpleasant results, the Buddha says, ultimately. And so more or less this is sort of the law of nature, or the law of causality, the Dhamma. That is what the Buddha discovered by his awakening. And so he taught this law of causality, what kind of actions have what results, and which actions lead in a better direction or in a worse direction, so that we can follow that and apply that. And so a very common explanation that the Buddha gives are these 10 pathways of actions, of wholesome or unwholesome, so it's the two opposites. And so for example, the positive side, someone abstains from killing living beings and is compassionate and without violence. He abstains from taking what is not given, or practices the positive opposite. He doesn't engage in sexual misconduct, or is faithful to the partner. Then with regard to the speech, he says words that are not harsh but gentle and pleasing to the ear and kind. And he speaks in a way that unites people and doesn't divide them. And he also speaks the truth and doesn't deceive others by their speech. And he also is focused on saying things that are useful and beneficial, and not just useless things. And then with regard to the mental actions, then he says someone is free from ill will or harming intentions, and he has this intention, it's nice described with the chanted also. May these beings be free from enmity, free from affliction and anxiety. May they live happily. So similar like we chanted in the beginning. So having this intention of friendliness or goodwill and compassion. And then also the right view that good actions actually have good results, and that actions have results also in this life, but also beyond death. And that there is something like a possibility that beings realize complete liberation. So that would be some example of general sort of overview of the most common ways of, let's say, wholesome and unwholesome actions that are of greatest importance in the sense of determining our karma for the worse or the better, that the Buddha often talks about them regularly. And also this implies that, let's say, virtue is not just a social convention. So, for example, that, let's say, lying or killing beings is considered something bad generally. It's not just because our society or culture or something like that, but this is actually something inherent in the law of causality of the universe, so that these actions will ripen in corresponding results. It's just like, let's say, if you walk towards a dark cave, then they will end up in darkness, and if you walk towards a sunny beach, then they will end up on a sunny beach as a result. And that's just the nature of actions. If the actions lead in this direction, then you will end up with that result. And so maybe some teaching on how to reflect about one's own actions and develop them. It's from Majjhima 61, one of the discourses of Venerable Rahula. And one important basis for developing one's actions is truthfulness. And naturally, if you can't really learn well from your actions if you're really true to yourself, sort of noticing what you did and what was your motivation or what you didn't do, or and also having this clarity about basically what is actually factual or not. And then also on a deeper level, if you develop your mind, then you also have to be more and more truthful in the sense of noticing how is the mind state, or what is going on in the mind. And naturally that doesn't work together if you have the tendency to conceal something. And so for that reason it's important to develop this quality of truthfulness and clarity, so that you can reflect about the actions and what are the real results, whether they're actually really unbeneficial or beneficial in a truthful way. The Buddha gives then a simile that you can reflect about your actions just like you would look in a mirror. And so just like a person is looking into a mirror, you can reflect, say, before I do an action, will this lead to harm for others or myself? And or then while you're doing an action, what is the effect? Or then afterwards, either short term or long term, what result did this action have? And so let's say before you say something, obviously one can reflect, am I going to say something harmful for that person, or something which damages the relationship with this person? Or while you're saying something, that you can notice that is that something harmful for them while you're doing it, and then also afterwards, sort of what effect did it have if I said that to that other person? And not by that we can gradually notice and get more skillful about our speech, for example, and train ourselves to talk in a different way or relate to people in a different way, and similar with our other actions as well. And so by reflecting about your actions, you can develop various good qualities. And so one quality would be heedfulness or diligence. So now you develop this sense of diligence because you realize that your actions make a difference between benefit and harm. And so it's important to actually be careful what you're doing and reflect on that. then also you develop compassion in the sense that you don't want to harm other beings or yourself with your actions. You can also develop truthfulness in the sense of, for example, if you want to learn from your actions, or if you want to improve your skillfulness of your actions, then you have to be willing to admit some mistakes or what was actually not working so well, and notice that. And so noticing what was the result of your actions and sort of being willing to admit mistakes, and for that you need truthfulness. And also integrity, so that you're taking responsibility for your actions. For example, if you did something harmful, then basically taking the responsibility for what you've done and seeing how you can lessen the damage, or help to improve the situation again. Yeah, then also wisdom. The Buddha says that it's actually not so easy if you, let's say, to convince yourself to choose to do some actions that bring some long-term good results, but actually maybe difficult to do now. And so rather than just following your moods or what you like and you don't like, following this principle, what is actually for a long-term benefit, rather than just for some short-term excitement or what seems to be attractive. And so developing this wisdom or this different perspective that some things are, for example, pleasant. They're pleasant now, but then actually have long-term harmful consequences. Or the other way around, then some things are sort of difficult to do and maybe unpleasant, but then they have actually pleasant results in the future. So usually, let's say, let's say if you want to achieve something, you have to put in this effort, which is maybe not so pleasant always, to get to some point. Let's say with studying, for example, that you have to put in this effort so that you then get this result of having this degree and being able to work in this profession. And so basically you have to sort of convince yourself and motivate yourself that you make this effort and continue with it until you achieve that result. And it's maybe not always easy or pleasant, but you sort of continue with that. Or on the other hand, let's say with the other example, with, let's say, things that are pleasant now and then have long-term damage. Let's say, if someone drinks alcohol, for example, then maybe to some extent some people find the effect pleasant, but then, also it has these negative effects. So the Buddha often teaches to pay attention to this aspect of what is the gratification that you get out of something, what is the disadvantage associated with it, and so reflecting about these two things and in a realistic way. And often we are not so clear about, we only see the advantage or the gratification, but we don't pay attention to the disadvantage. And by reflecting about the actions, we can also develop alertness or clear comprehension. For example, you develop this capability to see clearly what you are doing while you're doing it, and then also noticing the results of your actions. So naturally, if you make an effort to reflect about your actions and try to act more skillfully, then you develop this clear comprehension. And also mindfulness, you sort of basically you remember to keep in mind, for example, what are these precepts, or what did the Buddha say about what is unwholesome and wholesome, and you keep that in mind, and then you sort of notice whether your actions are in line with that or not. And so remembering this, and also maybe remembering some lessons from the past what you already did in certain situations, and then also ardency or diligence in terms of trying to do your best to avoid harm. So by developing your actions, for example, by keeping precepts or practicing the Dhamma, then one can develop these different qualities associated with it. And the same is true also on a more subtle level with the mind itself, with the heart or mind. Already, if you try to develop, follow some precepts, then then also naturally you will also notice more what are your intentions, for example. And maybe you notice what kind of mind states lead more to breaking precepts, and which ones actually don't, or basically by that observing precepts leads more to something like inward reflection in terms of how is the state of your mind and which mind states are conducive to, for example, breaking precepts. But then also just, for example, with thinking, like what kind of topics to think about makes you rather disturbed or confused, or what kind of topics to think about makes the mind maybe even more peaceful or bright. And also learning how can you direct your mind so that maybe it becomes more peaceful, or so it's also then this developing your actions also that extends to the mind, and the whole topic of meditation, of right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. So there's also Kamma, in terms of, let's say, meditation is also a form of Kamma, of mental action. And so Kamma is also not deterministic. It's more like planting seeds. So, for example, if you plant some seeds of a bitter plant, or a plant which will have some sweet fruit, then for example, you won't get let's say, if you plant a bitter melon vine and a grape vine, you will not get, they will produce the respective fruit, and they don't produce the fruit of the other plant naturally. So you can't expect it the other way around. And but to what extent this seed will grow depends on, for example, on the soil, on rain, the sun, or whether the seed is damaged, or other plants growing over it. And so in a similar way, you could say your actions, you plant some Kamma seeds, and then they will tend to give respective pleasant or unpleasant results. But how and when and in what way they ripen exactly depends on what other actions you have done before and do after. So, for example, you can nurture some tendency or continue on a certain path, and then this will amplify this way of Kamma and how it unfolds. On the other hand, if you, let's say, develop in a different way, act in a different way, then you can it will not have such a strong effect. So on the positive side, on the bright Kamma, the Buddha gives often impressive examples what we can achieve if we take responsibility of our own actions and develop the mind, especially in a systematic way. So that Kamma is not just linear. So the Buddha says, let's say if you're a human being with a lifespan of maybe 80 years or something like that, and you practice something, let's say practice Dhamma for 10 years, 20 years, then the Buddha emphasizes that can lead to million years of happiness in the future. So it's not just that you practice something a little bit and then maybe you experience just a little bit of happiness, but depending on the power of your Kamma, that can have very long-lasting effect. The power of your good actions. Especially because if you develop the mind, then you also become a different kind of being gradually. Sense of So it's good to remember that the Buddha gives this perspective that actually how far our actions can lead us. That we just have this limited perspective of 50 years or 80 years, but then by practicing, let's say, meditation or practicing virtue, it can have these very long-term effects. So it's at least important to also consider that. And obviously, if people would know that, if people would actually be able to see what kind of results these actions give, then they would be very enthusiastic to practice that. But unfortunately, one only has this limited perspective, that if one doesn't have psychic powers to actually see how Kamma unfolds, then one can just see the results in this life, not in the future lives. And so then, on the other hand, how can we weaken or transcend old Kamma or maybe bad Kamma that we have made in previous time? In ancient India, some ascetics, they believe that you can sort of burn off your old Kamma by inflicting pain on the body, by practicing austerities. So, let's say whatever, you sit on some thorns or something like that, and then as ascetic austere practice, and then sort of burn off some old Kamma by that. So the Buddha then points out, actually they don't burn off any old Kamma by that. No, they don't burn off any results of old Kamma by that, but this is actually just the result of the present Kamma, that they sit on the thorns. So it's actually not really any benefit. So and so the Buddha says it's possible to weaken the results of past bad Kamma more or less by what other actions you do. So if you accumulate lots of good actions, let's say if you develop your mind and your life in a different way, then sort of how the results of Kamma unfold depends on the mixture of the results of good and bad actions that you did. And so the Buddha gives this simile that, for example, if you put a spoonful of salt into a glass of water, then it's not drinkable. But if you put it into a large river, then it's almost unnoticeable, because the mass of water in this river is so large. Let's say if it's the Ganges River or something like that. And so it's similar with the result of our own past actions. And so, let's say if we have maybe done some unwholesome actions, but then also developed our life in a different way and developed lots of good actions, then it depends on the sort of combination, how this combination is, just like with the salt in the water glass or the salt in the whole river. And so similar, then let's say if one has developed some sort of immeasurable Kamma by developing lots of loving kindness or compassion, then this sort of limited Kamma of whatever other actions one has done is very small in comparison to that, because this other Kamma of, let's say, developing immeasurable compassion or loving kindness is so vast. And so the Buddha recommends, if one has done something unskillful, basically recognizing it clearly as unskillful and wrong, and then to make this intention not to do it in the future again. And so reflecting like that on the harm of this action, and then developing in a different way. And so in this way, we can basically avoid and transcend this other way of unwholesome actions. And if sometimes as human beings we have been reborn as human beings, and so that was the result of mixed Kamma, so some bright Kamma and some dark Kamma. So we experience some, let's say, sometimes we experience some nice things, but then also sometimes some things go wrong or even tragedies happen. So when rather than asking, let's say, what did I do in the past that happened to me, that actually will not lead very far. But a more useful question is, how can I develop my mind so that it gets less affected negatively? So that one basically develops the mind. Can you develop your mind that it gets less affected by whatever happens in terms of results of Kamma that we experience? And that's in a way a useful response. And beyond that, this possibility of, the Buddha says there are 4 kinds of Kamma. The Kamma that is dark and has dark results, the Kamma that is bright and has bright results, and then the mixed Kamma that is mixed dark and bright results. And then there's also the Kamma that is neither dark nor bright and leads to the end of Kamma. And so, but this specific way of development, this is the Noble Eightfold Path, the way of practice that the Buddha described that leads to liberation and also to the end of Kamma. And by meditation you become more and more sensitive to present actions, what is going on in the mind, and which ways of directing, inclining the mind are the origin of suffering, or creating more disturbance. What do you do with your mind that it leads to more peace or stillness? And so one can basically look at the mind like this on a more subtle level in terms of reflecting about one's actions. So ultimately the cause of suffering is ultimately it lies in our own unskillful actions in the past and how we react to the results of our past Kamma, the sense, contact and feelings that we experience now. So, but this also means that the only thing that can lead us to less suffering and to more peace is becoming more skillful and wise about our own actions. And so in this way we can see that the skillfulness of our own actions or Kamma can be our refuge. The higher our skillfulness, the higher the skillfulness of our action is, the less you will suffer from the results of bad actions in the past, and then also experience more and more profound peace and happiness in this life and future lives, up to the complete freedom from suffering and liberation. So that this perspective that by, say, developing this path of the Buddha, you get more and more skillful bodily, verbal and mental actions, and by that experience more and more peace, especially internally in terms of the mind. And so in this way, we can trust in our ability to train ourselves and develop ourselves, and apply ourselves to this training. And what we will experience in the New Year is uncertain, but if you practice the teaching of the Buddha, then you're sort of ready to respond to any sense contact and any experience in a more skillful or wiser way, or at least develop in this direction. And by that the life goes into a better direction, to a better, brighter future in terms of external conditions, but also in terms of the mind or heart. So in terms of the quality of the heart or mind, and that the heart itself becomes brighter or more peaceful in the present as well. Okay, maybe we can just meditate a few minutes briefly. You can maybe remember a few of the similes, like reflecting about the actions, like looking into a mirror. And similar, that we can sort of have this reflective capability with regard to our mind, our mental actions. So that if we, for example, if you stay with your breath, with your body, then you can also notice that how is the mind, the quality of the mind, and what kind of activity is going on, what kind of actions are happening there. And so for example, staying with the breath or developing love and kindness, then that one does some skillful mental actions. So let's say having the thoughts of love and kindness, developing it, or staying with the peacefulness or the energizing quality of the breath. And then the mind becomes less distracted. And so that would be examples for mental actions that lead to a state which is more skillful or less suffering, less disturbed. And so one can also reflect about the significance of what we are doing here and how it relates to what I just said, and why we came here for the start of the new year. For example, we came here because we have this aspiration to follow precepts, and so training our actions, our speech, so that we act in accordance with them. So it would be one part of that, or taking refuge and see the Triple Gem as guide, and then applying this instruction, this training. Or we came here to train and develop the mind in meditation. So everything that we do this evening is related to this fact that we have this aspiration to do actions that lead our lives to a good direction, and to train so that our actions, our speech and our mind states become more skillful. So that's almost the purpose of this evening program. And just like in this Dhamma-Talk quote that I mentioned before, irrigators channel the water, the arrow makers straighten the arrow shafts, the carpenters shape the wood, and the wise train themselves. and maybe you can also notice what is described about this sort of feedback loop, that some mental images, some thoughts come up, and then we sort of react to them or run with them or reinforce them. Then sort of there's this feedback loop of this sort of images or thoughts coming up and then our response to them. And so how this feedback loop usually continues and sort of churns out more and more activity. It's a very simple structure, but it creates this sort of incredible diversity in our mind. And so, yeah, if we instead direct the mind to a meditation object like the breath or loving kindness, developing loving kindness, then more or less we develop a different kind of feedback loop which leads to something more wholesome and basically directs the mind to a different path. Yeah, so we can remember, for example, the quality of loving kindness, friendliness for ourselves and other beings, the people here. Having this feeling of friendliness or wishing other people well, just like we chanted in the beginning of the evening program. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will. Directing this quality of loving kindness to ourselves and outwards.